Jacques Lacan was a French psychoanalyst who expanded on Sigmund Freud's work, becoming one of the most important thinkers of the 20th century. His ideas changed how people understood the human mind, identity, and desire. Lacan's writing is known for being complex, but his influence is widespread, especially in psychology, literature, and philosophy. Ecrits, a collection of his major essays, published in 1966, covering over 2 decades of his work. These essays present his theories on subjects like how we form our sense of self, how language shapes our thoughts, and how desire works. Though it's hard to read, Ecrits is considered essential for understanding Lacan's contributions to psychoanalysis and modern thought. One of Lacan's most famous ideas is the mirror stage, which he first introduced early in his career. This theory explains how infants start to form a sense of who they are. Lacan says that between the ages of 6 and 18 months, a baby recognizes itself in a mirror or in the eyes of others. This recognition is important because it helps the baby create a sense of self or identity. However, there's a twist. The baby sees a complete, whole image in the mirror, but inside, it feels disorganized and unable to control its body. This leads to what Lacan calls misrecognition. The baby mistakenly thinks the image it sees is who it really is. This creates a lasting feeling of alienation because we constantly compare ourselves to an idealized version of ourselves that we can never quite live up to. This process of misrecognition shapes how we see ourselves for the rest of our lives. The unconscious and language. Lacan builds on Freud's idea of the unconscious, the part of the mind where hidden desires, thoughts, and memories exist, but gives it a new twist. He famously says, "The unconscious is structured like a language." This means that the unconscious mind works through symbols, words, and rules, much like how language operates. Instead of viewing the unconscious as just a place where repressed desires are stored, Lacan argues that it's a system that functions through connections between words and meanings. He explains this through 2 language processes, metaphor and metonymy. Metaphor is when one word stands in for another, like in poetry, while metonymy involves words that are associated with each other in a sequence like crown standing for king. Lacan says that dreams, slips of the tongue, and even psychological symptoms work in these ways, using language-like mechanisms to express hidden desires. The real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. Lacan divides human experience into 3 overlapping areas, which he calls the real, the imaginary, and the symbolic. These areas help explain how we understand the world and ourselves. The imaginary. This is tied to images and fantasies, including how we see ourselves and others. It begins with the mirror stage, where we identify with the image we see, even if it's not the whole truth of who we are. The symbolic. This is the world of language, social rules, and cultural structures. It includes everything that shapes how we interact with others and makes sense of the world, like language, laws, and societal expectations. Entering the symbolic world is like learning to speak and follow social norms. The real. The real is everything that exists outside of language and cannot be fully explained by words. It's the raw, unprocessed reality that's hard to describe or understand, like intense emotions or traumatic experiences. We can't fully express the real, and it often shows up when the structures of language and society fail to make sense of something. These 3 areas work together to shape how we think, act, and desire. When these areas come into conflict, it can lead to psychological issues like anxiety or confusion. Desire, the other, and lack. Lacan puts a lot of emphasis on desire, which he says is a central part of being human. For him, desire is always influenced by others. This includes not just individual people, but also society, language, and cultural norms. He uses the term other to talk about this external influence. Lacan also believes that desire comes from a sense of lack, or something missing inside us. We never feel fully complete. And this feeling of incompleteness starts when we first see ourselves as separate individuals during the mirror stage. As a result, we spend our lives desiring things to fill this void. But since the lack is part of being human, we can never fully satisfy our desires. A key concept Lacan introduces here is the objet petit a, which means little object A. This refers to the elusive object or idea we think will complete us, but in reality, it's impossible to fully obtain. This object keeps our desires going, but it's always out of reach. It might take different forms for different people, like love, success, or money, but it always represents the idea of something that could make us feel whole, even though we never quite get it. The role of the psychoanalyst. Lacan had strong opinions about how psychoanalysis should work. He didn't agree with the traditional view that a psychoanalyst should simply interpret a patient's issues and offer solutions. Instead, Lacan thought that the analyst should act more like a mirror, reflecting the patient's words back to them, helping them understand their own unconscious desires. The goal of psychoanalysis for Lacan is not to fix the patient, but to help them confront the truth about their desires and how these desires are shaped by language and society. In this way, the analyst doesn't give answers, but rather guides the patient to discover the structures in their own mind that drive their behavior. Lacan also emphasized the importance of listening closely to how patients use language. He argued that language reveals hidden aspects of the unconscious. For example, through slips of the tongue or odd patterns in speech, we can detect the deep structures shaping someone's identity or neuroses. He called the main ideas or symbols shaping a person's mind the master signifiers, big concepts or terms that hold together their sense of self and view of the world. Lacan's ethics of desire. Lacan's work also has an ethical dimension, meaning he cared about how we should live and what it means to live well. He didn't believe ethics was about following rules or achieving happiness. Instead, he thought ethics was about staying true to your own desire, even when it's uncomfortable or goes against social expectations. Lacan's famous ethical statement is, "Do not give up on your desire." By this, he meant that people should face the truth of what they really want, even if it's difficult or socially unacceptable. This doesn't mean indulging in every impulse, but rather recognizing and accepting the deeper forces that shape our desires rather than running away from them. Lacan's influence and legacy. Though Lacan's work is complex and often difficult to understand, his ideas have had a huge impact on many fields, from psychoanalysis to literature and cultural studies. His theories about how language, desire, and the unconscious interact have influenced famous thinkers like Slavoj Žižek, Judith Butler, and Julia Kristeva. Lacan's critics argue that his writing can be overly complicated and sometimes feels more like philosophy than practical psychology. However, many scholars and theorists find his ideas to be crucial for understanding modern issues related to identity, culture, and the human mind. In summary, Ecrits contains Lacan's most important ideas about how we develop our sense of self, how language shapes our unconscious mind, and how desire operates in human life. While it's challenging to read, it remains a cornerstone of modern psychoanalytic theory and continues to inspire new interpretations in a wide range of disciplines. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Gluschow Thoislogleip.